Yes, I'm the Hot Rod Reverend, and yes, I'm addicted to Y blocks, and yes, I also admit that no engine is perfect. Guys, Hot Rod Reverend here. Welcome to the channel. Today we're talking about the biggest mistakes that Ford made with the Y-block Ford V8. Now, just so there's no confusion, let's set the record straight. In 1952, Ford Motor Company introduced the Lincoln and Truck series of Y-blocks. In 1954, Ford introduced the 239 and 256 cubic inch Ford series of Y-blocks. The Lincoln and Truck and the Ford series of Y-blocks are different. Now, when I say truck and the Lincoln series, I'm talking about the heavy-duty trucks and the larger displacement engine. Lately on the channel, there's been a series of videos that I've dropped that have gotten thousands of views and hundreds of comments, and a lot of people are upset and some people are really happy. So I just want to set the record straight here. I'm not drinking any Kool-Aid here in Southern California. The heat's not got to me. But we do want to talk about some of the mistakes that were found in the Y-block Ford V8 very early on in the 1950s. Let me say at the outset, you guys know I am a big fan of the Ford Y-block. A lot of you guys come to this channel to get Y-block information, and that's great. But I do want to set the record straight today and just walk you through some of the largest mistakes that I think Ford made back in the 50s with the Y-block. The first mistake is this, and that is if you look at this diagram here I've popped up on the screen. Now, this diagram may look okay to you, but here's the main issue. When Ford released this diagram of the oiling passages, it shows a straight shot from the block up through the heads and to the rocker arm shafts. The issue with this is that that is not the case. Whatever happened in design, R&D, and final production, the oiling passages that go up to the rocker arm shafts take two 90-degree turns right there at the head. I've got another video here that I've dropped on the channel that'll help explain this and how to watch out for this. Let's be clear, this was not a mistake in getting oil to the top end. These days with modern detergent oils, there are no issues with getting oil to the rocker arm shafts. As a matter of fact, a lot of us that pressurize our shafts, we've got to make sure we don't get too much oil up there. However, back in the day in the 50s, Ford took it for granted that people would follow the owner's manuals in their cars and change their oil every 3,000 miles or so, use an oil filter, and really follow the manufacturer's recommendations about preventative maintenance. Back in the 50s, people didn't do that. And today, maybe that wouldn't be so much of a problem, but back then, with the lower grade and quality of oil, you had to change your oil more often. You didn't really have detergent oil. It wasn't very prevalent. It cost more. People didn't want to buy it. You get into a lot of different things. Even the 265 cubic inch Chevrolet V8, when it came out in 1955, when you went to the dealership, it didn't come with an oil filter. You had to order that extra. So back in the 50s, it was a different day. The problem with this 90-degree jog that the oil passage takes is that if you don't change your oil gets sludged up a little bit, contaminants are there, it will clog that oil passage right there with that 90-degree turn. They'll starve the top end. What happens, and I'll show you, I have disassembled a lot of Y-blocks that weren't taken care of. The oil wasn't changed. You see a lot of the paraffin and the sludge and everything when you open up the crankcase. But let me show you what happens with the rocker arm as it wears. It'll get that bad as that rocker arm is riding on that shaft if it doesn't get the oil that it needs. Unfortunately, even today, well-known reputable engine builders will come up with some octopus-style tentacles and everything else with lines going everywhere inside the block to try to quote-unquote beat the idea of the top end not getting oil. In my 30-plus years of owning a bunch of Y-blocks, I've never had any issue getting oil to the top end, and that's just scores of Y-blocks and Y-block powered cars and trucks that I've owned. Use a quality detergent oil these days. Change your oil filter. You will be fine. Now, when I disassemble these Y-block engines that have been taken care of, I do save the rocker arms. I've got a whole mess of them. They can be rebushed, and you can send them off to a company that will take care of that for you. I'll put a link down here in the description for you. You can take a look at that. It'll be a big help to you if you want to get your rocker arm assemblies rebuilt. At times, I am able to keep these in stock. here on my website, hotrodreverend.com. The second mistake that Ford made with the Y block is this. Ford was really not paying attention to the cubic inch race. The Y block really, 1954 to 1957, was the time that Ford did a lot of R&D, a lot of work. We know that by the time we get to 1957, Ford's got two fours coming from the factory, the intake, and of course the two Holley 4-barrels, or maybe the Carters there for the Mercs. Then we've also got an F code, which is a Paxton supercharged version in 1957 as well. The problem is that Ford, when they designed the Y block, there's such a limitation on bore and stroke that you couldn't go any larger. Now, Ford must have realized this in late 55, maybe 56, when you have really the beginnings of the R&D of the FE series of blocks that come out in 1958. Thankfully, Ford recognized that, and as we see the FE line go up into the 60s, we get the venerable 427 side oiler thing, just the engine of legend. FE series really is the older cousin of the Ford Y block. Now, you guys know here at the channel, I love the Y block immensely, and I have even produced a video to give you several reasons why you ought to keep the Y block Ford engine in your vehicle these days. I think it'd be great. However, let's be clear, there is no replacement for displacement. And as time wore on, we saw the Y block kind of get phased into a high torque, lower horsepower truck engine. And of course, it lasts in the truck line until 1964, United States. You get into South America, that continent there, and Argentina, Brazil, and other countries, Ford is using the Y block up until 1982. In trucks, and then there's Fairlanes or Galaxies that it went into in the 60s and the early 70s in South American countries. The next problem that Y blocks have is kind of a standing joke among a lot of owners and people that like to throw rocks at the Y block, and that is this. People will say Y blocks like to mark their spot. That just simply means that at the rear main seal, Y blocks are known or prone, quote unquote, to leak oil there and drip. Now, here's the issue. Ford has this style. This is an actual 272, 292 rear main seal retainer, and it's obviously just one piece. But that piece is separate of the last rear main cap for your crankshaft. Now, that's important because Ford realized this, and in 1958, when we had the beginning of the next series and Y block's older cousin, Ford makes the rear main seal retainer and that rear main bearing cap as one, and that really helps to solve a lot of issues with this flimsy piece right here. In the early days of the Y block, they were all rope seals at the rear main seal, just a two-piece asbestos rope that was sealing off that rear crank journal. If you didn't take care of your engine and you didn't change your filter for your crankcase breather, and if that got clogged up, you didn't have a good crankcase ventilation and air flowing from your oil filler cap all the way through your crankcase, then you'd build up pressure, especially as your engine got a lot of miles on it, maybe a lot of time idling, whatever it might have been. Your rings get a little bit worn, you got a lot of blow-by and a lot of pressure. The crankcase pressure then is going to cause the engine to leak at the weakest seal that's a part of your crankcase. And for a lot of Y block owners, end up discovering that the weakest area to seal on your engine is that rear main seal retainer. Now these days, we've got neoprene seals for the Y block, and from 239 and then all the way up to 312 as well. For me, I really encourage you, I don't get any money for this at all to make this recommendation, but it's my opinion that Best Gasket has really the best rear main seals for your Y block. I really encourage you to install those. Also, my buddy Tim McMaster and of course Ted Eaton too and a couple others have some really good information on this rear main seal retainer and getting both the sides sealed up well, and of course also making sure that you got your neoprene seal fitted well to both the block and your retainer, and it'll ensure a leak-free installation. The next big mistake that Ford made with the Y block is a real doozy, and it involves the ignition system. 1954, 55, and 56, Ford had this quote-unquote bright idea to design their distributors to be specially matched with the carburetor's vacuum signal, and for each distributor to have only vacuum advance. You heard right. These distributors have no mechanical advance. Now, these things work fine when mated with their original carburetor and the vacuum signal matched and everything else. Not a problem. Make sure the points were adjusted. You had the juice you needed. You're okay. However, for performance, these were horrible. It wasn't until 1957 when Ford introduced the distributors that had both mechanical and vacuum advance did the Y block really kind of wake up to its best potential in horsepower and torque. And that's because of the improvements in the ignition system. Even in the modern day, a lot of guys do not understand this. They don't get it. I've dropped several videos here on my channel. I'll put some of the links here in the description for you to take a look at so you can get an understanding of the differences in the ignition systems, 54 to 56, and then 57 and following. You don't want to get a mismatch with original carburetors and the later distributors, or the early distributors especially, and the later carburetors. Vacuum signals do not work well together. You're going to have serious issues with your vehicle. Unfortunately for Ford, these ignition systems gave the Y block a bad reputation right out of the gate because of the limitation of its design and the fact that you could not have mechanical advance at all from 54, 5, and 6 in your Y block Ford. Okay, one of the biggest mistakes that Ford made is going to sound very odd here because if you watch a lot of the videos on my channel, you're going to find that I've got a lot of tech on the Holley 4000. I have one on my car right now, my 1955 Ford Fairlane Club sedan. It's running great. Just to show you what I mean about this Holley 4000, we are cold, and we'll just hit the key here and fire right up. But here's the reason why I believe this was a big mistake. Ford in 54, 5, and 6, exclusively for their 4-barrel line in the Fords, not the Mercurys, but the Fords, were using what's called the Holley 4000. Now this carburetor is kind of odd. It has a small square base, and it has one float bowl, one center hung float there. And then what's also weird is that it has these tubes that feed the secondary. Now I'm holding a secondary feed tube for the 1955 model year. And then Ford kind of tried to straighten that a little bit with this one here from the 1956 model year as well. These were used in 57, of course, on the 2x4. Ford still kept on to the Holley 4000s in 1957 with the 2 4-barrel intakes that they put together for Thunderbird, of course, the E-Code, and then some of the cars that came with them too. The issue with this carburetor is not so much how it runs. Mine runs fine. A lot of them, if you maintain them, is great. Now, the problem with these is that guys would really not maintain them well. Those secondary tubes were prone to leak if your O-rings were not sealed correctly. Guys would not pay attention to what they're doing. They take off the float bowl lid. They put it back on. Maybe they cut the O-ring a little bit. These things would leak. These things had a reputation being known as the Towering Inferno. People call them the haystack carburetors. A lot of jokes out there about carrying a fire extinguisher with you. They perform just fine at the track. Of course, we know that Ford took one of these Holley 4000s, modified that, and put that as the base for their F-Code series in 1957 when the Ford made well over 300 horsepower, 312 Y block with a supercharged Holley 4000 sitting on top of the intake there. So these things work fine. But we know there had to be some problems because there's a complete redesign by Holley. We basically get in 1957 what we still see today with Holley, and of course you got a primary float bowl, you've got a secondary float bowl, how all of this worked when they're side hung and everything else. There's so many variations on the Holley carburetors today from 1957 till the present time. I'm not going to go through all of those, but in the 50s, these kinds of things right here and kind of overpowering the Holley 4000 with too much fuel pressure made a real problem for these carburetors and gave Ford a bad name that was associated with the Y block because of the carburetor of the time. Now, while that may have been a mistake for Ford, I want to say again, in the modern day, these things are not that difficult to put back together. Pay attention to what you're doing. They run just fine. I know that mine does, and a number of ones that I've built. If you have a Holley 4000 on your Y block, it's not a problem. Take a look at a lot of the videos I have here on the channel. It'll be a big help to you. Follow that advice, and the thing will run great for you for many years to come. Last thing to say about the Ford Y block and some of the mistakes that were made by Ford Motor Company is this. When you read through the technical service bulletin, you're going to find a lot of different things. Sometimes the details are very nuanced. There's small specifics, small things about this bolt, this nut, whatever it might be. But one of the biggest issues that you'll find in the technical service bulletin list is this. Ford listed too high of a torque specification for the 312 main caps. What ended up happening with a lot of these blocks? Today, if you tear down a 312, one of the things that's very common to look for is to see if your main caps were over torqued because of following Ford specification back in the 50s. It took too much time for Ford to correct this, too much time to get out the information to everyone. You remember back in the day, you didn't have YouTube, you didn't have social media. You certainly weren't going to put stuff out on TV or anything like that. So it was hard to get all that information out, even to the dealerships. Try to get them to understand, do not over torque the main caps. And probably for a lot of people that tear down 312s, the first thing you're going to be looking for to see if the block is usable is just to see if there's any cracks down there at the mains, because it's probably been over torqued if it was rebuilt at one time, or if somebody took off a main cap to inspect one of the bearings. That's about all the time we have today. I want to thank you for joining us. Now, maybe you have an opinion about what the biggest mistake was that Ford made when it came to the Y block in the 50s and maybe the 60s. Why don't you drop a comment below, let us know. And if you have an opportunity, shoot us a link if it's something on a website or maybe another video that you'd like to share. And we'd love to know about it. So thank you guys for being with us today. I hope that you'll visit hotrodreverend.com, find out more about the channel, about myself. The reason I'm called the Hot Rod Reverend, I am a preacher of the gospel of Jesus Christ, and it's my privilege not only to own this 1955 Ford Club sedan and to tinker on Y blocks and put out a lot of great stuff here on YouTube for you guys, but also to preach the gospel of Jesus Christ. I believe that in this world today, that is the message, and Jesus is the Savior that we need. And I hope that you'll take a look at everything we've got on the website. Join us for Wednesdays in the Word Bible study. Each Wednesday morning, we'll drop a quick 10, 15-minute video or so, and it'll be our privilege if you'd subscribe, like, share the video. God bless you, and we'll see you on the next one.